The emergency sirens screamed through every corridor of Galactic Medical Station Epsilon 7, their piercing wail echoing off metal walls like the cry of some wounded beast. Red warning lights bathed everything in an ominous glow, casting dancing shadows that made the massive space station feel like the inside of a beating heart. Dr. Yura. Belthany pressed her blue-scaled palms against the thick containment glass, her breath fogging the surface as she watched the chaos unfold beyond her. Prison. Her people, the Velthani, from the ice world of Cathara, were naturally beautiful creatures with scales that shimmered like frozen starlight. But now those same scales crackled with deadly frost patterns that spread across her skin like living ice. Code Red, Medical Base 7, the station's AI announced in its emotionless voice. Containment breach casualty being transported to emergency cryogenic treatment. Commander Vexstar, a grizzled veteran with 4 compound eyes that had seen too many battles, watched grimly as another medical gurney rushed past. The Zephyrian medic strapped to it was completely frozen, his normally purple skin now white as Arctic snow, his body rigid as a statue. Ice crystals covered his uniform, and his eyes stared sightlessly at the ceiling. "That makes 7 casualties in 2 days," Vexstar reported into his communicator, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "We can't keep losing people like this." The medical staff is getting scared to even approach the containment area. Down the corridor, Lieutenant Kim Dae-yoon of the Human Colonial Forces pushed through the crowd of alien personnel. At 28, he was considered young for his rank, but his service record spoke for itself. He had survived the Kepler Station disaster, helped evacuate 3 colonies during the Void Storm crisis, and earned commendations from species across the galaxy for his quick thinking under pressure. His dark eyes took in the scene with practiced efficiency. Panic was spreading through the station like a virus. Alien crew members from 12 different worlds whispered in their native languages, but the fear in their voices needed no translation. Some were already requesting transfers off the station. Dae-yoon said, stepping up to the observation window where the command staff had gathered. "Request permission to review the containment protocols." General Threshka, the station commander, turned his massive head toward the human. Were giant insectoid beings standing nearly 8 feet tall, with chitinous armor that could stop plasma rounds. His mandibles clicked nervously as he spoke. "Lieutenant, every xenobiology expert in the sector has reviewed those protocols. 3 different species have attempted contact using their most advanced protective gear. All failed. The Corvin energy shields, the Altarian biosuits. Even the synthetic android units, nothing can withstand direct contact with Dr. Velthany. Through the reinforced glass, they could see Yura pacing in her containment cell like a caged animal.
Oh.
The room was designed to hold the most dangerous specimens in the galaxy, with walls thick enough to contain a small nuclear explosion. But it wasn't built to contain a broken heart. "Please," her voice crackled through the intercom system, distorted by interference from her own energy field. "I can feel it getting worse. Cold is spreading through my bones, my blood, my brain. I can't think straight anymore. Every breath feels like swallowing liquid nitrogen." Daeon stepped closer to the glass, studying her with the intensity of a scientist examining a rare specimen. But unlike the others, there was no clinical detachment in his gaze. He saw the terror in her amber eyes, the way her hands shook not from cold, but from fear of what she had become. "Tell me about the artifact again," he said quietly. Dr. Kethrin, station's chief scientist, floated closer on her anti-gravity platform. The aquatic Kethrin needed water-filled suits to survive in the station's atmosphere, and her tentacles moved through the fluid with graceful precision as she manipulated holographic displays. The excavation team found it buried in the ruins of an ancient city on Nexus Prime. She explained, her voice bubbling through the translation device. "Nexus Prime has been dead for over 10,000 years, but the artifact was still active, still pulsing with some kind of unknown energy." The holographic display showed a crystalline structure about the size of a human fist, its surface covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and move when observed directly. Even in the recording, it seemed to radiate an otherworldly presence. Dr. Velthani was the team's Zen archaeologist, Catherine continued. She had studied similar artifacts from other dead civilizations, but the moment she made physical contact with this one, my whole world changed, Yura whispered from behind the glass. Now, wait, clock, why, one, why, great one, why, one, I, why, cry, well, like. 0. The cold didn't just enter my body, it became part of me. That's right. Every cell in my body is now a miniature ice factory, producing thermal energy in reverse. The energy readings on the monitor spiked again, and everyone in the observation area took an involuntary step back. The glass itself was beginning to frost over despite the environmental controls working at maximum capacity. The field is expanding, announced a technician, his voice tight with worry. If this continues, it could affect the entire medical wing. We might have to evacuate this section of the station. And then what? Dayon asked, his voice cutting through the growing panic. We abandon her? Let her die alone in that cell? General Threshka's mandibles clicked in agitation. Lieutenant, I understand your concern, but we have 3,000 beings on this station. I cannot risk their lives for one person, no matter how tragic her situation. Every solution we've tried has been technological, Dayon continued, ignoring the general's implied threat: force fields, protective suits, robotic intermediaries. Maybe we need to try something different. What are you suggesting? Dayon looked back at the woman behind the glass. She had stopped pacing and was now sitting on the floor, her knees drawn up to her chest, rocking back and forth like a child. Afraid of the dark. Ice crystals formed in the air around her with each breath. Direct contact. Skin to skin. Ow. The entire command staff fell silent. Even the background hum of the station's system seemed too quiet, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. That's suicide, Vextar said flatly. You saw what happened to the others. They didn't just freeze, they froze instantly. Our hearts stopped mid-beat. Maybe, but humans are different. We've survived in environments that would kill most species. Our thermal regulation system, our bioelectric fields were built to adapt. Built to adapt, not built to survive absolute zero at the cellular level. General Threshka rumbled. This isn't a request I can approve, Lieutenant. But Dayon was no longer listening to the protests. He was watching Yura through the glass, seeing the desperation in her eyes, the way she kept looking at her own hands as if they belonged to someone else. She was dying in there, not from the cold, but from the isolation, from being treated like a monster instead of a person who needed help. She doesn't deserve to die alone, he said quietly, his hand already moving toward the containment release panel, the containment field. Shimmered like water before flickering out of existence. Lieutenant Kim Dayon stepped through the invisible barrier, and the world around him transformed into an Arctic nightmare. The temperature plunged so fast that his ears popped from the pressure change. His breath came out in thick white clouds that froze into tiny ice crystals before hitting the floor with soft tinkling sounds. The containment chamber itself was a marvel of galactic engineering. It's built to hold the most dangerous specimens in known space. Its walls were lined with energy dampeners and temperature regulators that could handle everything from plasma-based life forms to creatures that existed in absolute zero. But none of that technology could contain what Dr. Yura Velthani had become. Warning. Life support systems failing in Containment Area 7, the station's AI announced with Mechanical.com. Ambient temperature dropping below sustainable levels. For most known species, Dr. Yura Velthani pressed herself against the far wall, like a cornered animal, her blue-scaled skin crackling with frost patterns that spread and shifted like living tattoos. The scales that had once been beautiful now looked like fragments of a shattered mirror, each one reflecting the cold light in painful sparkles. Ice crystals grew from her hair, her clothes, even from the tears that tried to form in her eyes. "No," she screamed, her voice echoing strangely in the super-cooled air. "Don't come any closer. I'll kill you just like I killed the others." Behind the observation window, the medical staff watched in horrified fascination. Commander Vextar's 4. Eyes were wide with disbelief. "The human's actually doing it," he whispered. "He's walking toward certain death." But Dayan's military training had kicked in, overriding every survival instinct that screamed at him to run. During his service with the colonial forces, he had walked through plasma storms, survived decompression events, and faced down creatures that gave seasoned Marines nightmares. Fear was something he had learned to control, not eliminate. The cold bit through his uniform like hungry teeth. His fingertips were already going numb, and he could feel ice crystals forming in his nostrils with each breath. But he kept walking forward, step by careful step, until he was close enough to see the terror in Yura's amber eyes. "My name is Dayon," he said, his voice surprisingly calm despite the deadly situation. "I know you're scared, Dr. Velthani, but you don't have to face this nightmare alone." She shook her head violently, sending ice crystals flying through the air like deadly snow. "You don't understand what I've become. 3 days ago, I was a normal person. I had friends, colleagues, a life. Now I'm a walking weapon of mass destruction?" Her voice cracked with emotion as she continued. "The Zephyrian medic was just trying to bring me food. He was being kind, and I killed him the second his hand brushed mine. The Corvin technician was attempting to adjust my environmental controls to make me more comfortable. I froze him solid before he could even scream." Through the observation window, Dr. Catherine's tentacles moved frantically over her instruments. "The energy readings are incredible," she reported to the watching staff. "The human's biothermal signature is actually rising to compensate for the cold exposure. I've never seen anything like it." "The synthetic android was the worst," Yura continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Didn't feel pain, didn't feel fear. It just walked up to me with that blank expression and extended its hand in greeting. I watched its entire system freeze and shut down in seconds. Even machines aren't safe from whatever I've become." Dayan stopped just outside her immediate reach, close enough that the cryogenic field surrounding her made his skin feel like it was being stabbed by thousands of tiny needles. But he didn't retreat. Instead, he slowly extended his hand toward her. "You're not a weapon," he said firmly. "You're Dr. Yura Velthani, is an archaeologist and winner of the Galactic Research Prize 3 years running. You're the person who discovered the Helix Nebula artifacts that saved the Andorian colonies from extinction." She stared at him in shock, her eyes wide with surprise. "How could you possibly know that?" "I read your research papers during the flight here. Your work on ancient civilizations is brilliant. Your theory about the connection between extinct species and their technological remnants revolutionized the entire field." His hand remained extended, rock steady, despite the deadly cold radiating from her body. "You're not a monster, Yura. You're a scientist who got hurt by something way beyond your control." The cryogenic field around her pulsed like a heartbeat, and ice crystals began forming on every surface in the chamber. The metal walls groaned under the stress of rapid temperature changes. The observation windows started frosting over so thick that the watching aliens could barely see what was happening. Inside, "I can't control it anymore," she whispered, staring at her own hands as if they belonged to someone else. "Every second it gets stronger. I can feel it spreading through my nervous system like liquid nitrogen in my veins. Soon it won't matter. If I'm touching someone or not, the field will be so strong that just being near me will be fatal." General Threshka's voice boomed through the intercom. "Lieutenant, aboard immediately. The containment field is destabilizing. You have 30 seconds before we have to seal that chamber permanently." But Dayan ignored the order. He looked into Yura's terrified eyes and saw something that everyone else had missed. Behind the fear, behind the guilt and self-hatred, there was still hope. A tiny spark of the brilliant scientist who had dedicated her life to understanding, The mysteries of the universe. I can't, she whispered, her voice breaking. Yes, you can, he said gently. Trust me. Around them, the chamber had become an alien landscape of ice and frost. Icicles hung from the ceiling like crystal teeth, and the walls were covered in patterns that looked like frozen lightning. The air itself seemed to sparkle with suspended ice crystals that caught the light and threw it back in rainbow prisms. Slowly, trembling not just from cold, but from 3 days of isolation and fear, Dr. Uravelthani began to reach toward the human's outstretched hand. Her movements were hesitant, jerky, like someone trying to defuse a bomb while wearing thick gloves. The entire station seemed to hold its breath. In the observation area, medical staff from a dozen different worlds watched in silence as 2 hands moved closer together, one human, warm despite the cold, the other alien, crackling with deadly frost patterns that could freeze a star. Time seemed to slow as their fingertips approached each other. Yura's hand shook violently, ice crystals falling from her scales like tears she could no longer shed. Dayan's hand remained steady, warm, inviting, the moment their skin made contact. Everyone expected to witness another casualty, another frozen statue to add to the growing list of victims. Instead, something impossible happened. Warmth flowed between them like electricity. The deadly frost patterns on Yura's skin began to recede, pulling back like ocean waves at low tide. For the first time in 3 days, the cryogenic field around her stabilized instead of growing stronger. And most miraculous of all, Dayun's hand remained unfrozen, his human warmth somehow neutralizing her lethal touch. Impossible, Dr. Catherine breathed from behind the frosted glass, her tentacles frozen in mid-motion over her instruments. Yura stared at their joined hands in absolute wonder, as if she were seeing her first sunrise after years of darkness. Then she looked up into Dayan's kind eyes, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she smiled. How? She whispered. I honestly don't know, he admitted, gently squeezing her fingers, but we're going to figure it out together. Promise you that. News of Lieutenant Kim Dayan's impossible immunity spread through galactic communication networks faster than a supernova explosion. Within 6 hours, every major news outlet in known space was broadcasting the same credible story. A human had touched the untouchable and lived. The footage of their joined hands, taken from the medical station's security cameras, played on screens across 1,000 worlds. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Medical Station Epsilon 7, which had been a quiet research outpost just days before, suddenly found itself at the center of the greatest military buildup the galaxy had seen in decades. Ships began arriving from every corner of known space, their hulls gleaming like deadly stars against the black backdrop of the void. Status report, General Threshka commanded from the station's command center, his massive form hunched over the tactical display that showed the growing fleet surrounding them. 37 warships and counting, sir, reported Commander Vextar, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly as new contacts appeared on the screen. The Zephyrian Empire has deployed their entire 3rd Fleet, including the Dreadnought, Eclipse's Fang. The Corvin Collective has sent their geometric battle formations, those ships on the outer perimeter. He paused, his voice dropping to a worried whisper. Those are Shadari Concordat vessels. I've never seen them venture this far into civilized space before. The tactical display looked like a 3-dimensional chessboard, where every piece was a weapon of mass destruction. Zephyrian ships, sleek and predatory like metal sharks, circled the station in attack formations. Corvin vessels, perfectly geometric and coldly logical, held precise positions that would allow them to destroy the station with mathematical efficiency. And lurking at the edges of sensor range, the mysterious Shadari ships waited like shadows given form. They all want the same thing. General Threshka explained grimly to Dayan as they watched the tactical display update in real time. 2. Study you, weaponize Dr. Valthani's condition, or eliminate what they see as a galactic threat entirely. Some of these species have been at war with each other for centuries, but they've put aside their differences to come here. In the medical bay, Dr. Uravelthani sat on an examination table while Dayun held her hand. their fingers intertwined like a lifeline between two drowning souls. Without his constant touch, her condition had begun to deteriorate rapidly. The cryogenic energy would surge through her system in waves, each one stronger than the last, threatening to break free and turn everything around her into a frozen wasteland. "I can feel them out there," she said quietly, her amber eyes distant and unfocused. "All those minds, all that fear and hatred and greed, it's making the artifact's power respond. The energy is building inside me like pressure in a volcano." The crystalline artifact sat on a nearby table, pulsing with an inner light that seemed to match the rhythm of her heartbeat. Dr. Catherine's tentacles moved frantically over her research equipment, trying to understand the connection between the ancient device and its unwilling host. "Your people's legends," Catherine said, her voice bubbling through the translation device. "Tell me more about these architects." Yora's grip tightened on Dayan's hand as another wave of energy surged through her. "The stories say they were the first spacefaring civilization, older than any of our current star maps. They left behind tests throughout the galaxy, hidden in ruins and artifacts, waiting for younger species to find them. Tests for what? Worthiness. Compassion. It's a willingness to sacrifice for others instead of seeking power for yourself." She looked down at the artifact, its pulsing light reflecting in her scaled skin. "The legends say that those who passed the tests would inherit the architects' greatest gift, the ability to bring peace to a chaotic universe." Suddenly, the station shook as proximity alarms blared throughout every corridor. The command center erupted in controlled chaos as officers rushed to their stations. "Incoming transmission from the Zephyrian flagship Eclipse's Fang," announced the communications officer, a young Altarian whose bioluminescent patches were flashing in distress patterns. "Admiral Klextar is demanding immediate surrender of Dr. Velthani for what he calls galactic security purposes." Through the massive viewport that dominated one wall of the command center, they could see the Eclipse's Fang moving into attack position. The dreadnought was a monster of metal and energy, over 2 kilometers long and bristling with enough firepower to crack a moon in half. Its weapons were already beginning to glow with charging energy. "They're not the only ones making demands," Vexter reported, his voice tight with tension. "The Corvin Collective is transmitting on all frequencies, declaring Dr. Velthani a unacceptable variable that must be eliminated for the greater good and the Shadari." He paused, checking his instruments. "The Shadari aren't saying anything, but their ships are moving into flanking positions." General Threshka's mandibles clicked in agitation as he processed the tactical situation. "We're caught in the middle of a potential 3-way war, all because of one person." "No," Dayun said firmly, rising from his chair in the medical bay. But keeping his grip on Yura's hand, "This isn't about one person. This is about fear. They're all afraid of what they don't understand, so they want to either control it or destroy it." The artifact on the table began to pulse more rapidly, its light growing brighter as it responded to the growing tension in the space around the station. Ura gasped as she felt the energy within her spike dangerously. "It's reacting to their hostility," she whispered, her voice strained with the effort of controlling the power that wanted to explode outward. "The more aggressive they become, the stronger the artifact's response. Dayan, I can't hold it back much longer. They start shooting at each other. The energy release could destroy everything within a light-year radius," Dr. Catherine finished, her tentacles frozen over her instruments as the implications sank in. Warning shots suddenly lit up the space between the opposing fleets like deadly fireworks. The Zephyrian ships fired plasma bolts that streaked past the Corvin formations, while the Corvins responded with precisely calculated energy beams that came within meters of Zephyrian hulls. Neither side was trying to hit yet, but the message was clear: back down or face the consequences, General Dayon said, his voice cutting through the tension in the command center like a blade through silk. "I request permission to address the fleet." General Threshka turned his massive head toward the human, his compound eyes reflecting the tactical display's glow. "You want to what?" "Talk to them. Show them what humanity does differently when faced with the impossible. There are over 30 warships out there, each one capable of reducing this station to cosmic dust. What could you possibly say that would make them stand down?" Dayan looked back toward the medical bay, where Euro was fighting to contain a power that could freeze stars. Then he looked at the tactical display showing the greatest military buildup in galactic history, all because different species couldn't agree on how to handle something they feared. The truth, he said simply, that sometimes the only way to win is to stop fighting. Another wave of warning shots exchanged between the fleets, and the artifact's pulsing reached a frequency that made the station's hull vibrate like a struck bell. Ancient mechanisms were awakening, as if somewhere in the depths of space and time. The architects themselves were watching to see what choice the galaxy would make. Lieutenant Kim Dae-yoon, prepared to bet everything on humanity's greatest strength. The courage to extend a hand in friendship, even when death itself was reaching back toward them. The communication channel crackled to life, with a burst of static that echoed across every ship in the massive fleet. On screens throughout the Armada, from the bridge of the mighty Zephyrian dreadnought to the cramped control rooms of Corvan attack cruisers, Lieutenant Kim Dae-yoon's image appeared with crystal clarity. He stood in the medical bay of Station Epsilon 7, his hands still firmly clasped with Dr. Yura Velthani, both of them positioned before the pulsing ancient artifact that had started this entire crisis. "My name is Lieutenant Kim Dae-yoon of the Human Colonial Forces," he began. His voice remarkably steady, considering that enough firepower to level a small planet was currently aimed directly at his location. 3 days ago, every one of you received the same emergency broadcast about a dangerous containment situation. You all dropped whatever you were doing and traveled here at maximum speed because you were afraid. The camera angle shifted slightly, showing the artifact behind them pulsing with an otherworldly light that seemed to bend reality around its crystalline edges. Ice crystals still clung to the walls of the medical bay, remnants of Yura's uncontrolled power, but they were melting now in the warmth generated by their joined hands. Afraid of a power you couldn't understand, couldn't control, couldn't possess for your own purposes? Daeon continued, his dark eyes looking directly into the camera as if he could see into the soul of every being watching. But look at what your fear has created. It's the largest military buildup in galactic history, all because one person needed help. Admiral Kleckstar's voice boomed across the communication channel from the bridge of Eclipse's Fang, his translator struggling to convey the fury in his alien speech patterns. "Human, you speak of help, but we see only a weapon of unprecedented destruction. Surrender the creature immediately, or we will reduce your station to cosmic dust." "She's not a creature," Daeon replied, with the patience of someone explaining basic math to a child. "Her name is Dr. Yura Velthani. She has 3 degrees in Xenarchaeology. She's published over 50 research papers. And she has a pet Cathara back on Cathara that she's worried sick about. She's someone's daughter, someone's friend, someone who laughs at bad jokes and cries during sad movies, and right now she's in more pain than any living being should ever have to endure." The Corvan Collective's response came as a harmonized chorus of voices speaking in perfect unison, a sound that always made other species uncomfortable. With its artificial precision, emotional appeals are irrelevant. The mathematical probability of galactic catastrophe requires immediate threat elimination. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one. "Detected from what?" Daeon asked, his voice rising slightly. "From someone who needs help? From a brilliant scientist who touched something she shouldn't have and got hurt? When did we decide that fear was more important than compassion?" Behind him, the artifact's pulsing grew more intense, slight shifting from the cold blue of deep space to something warmer, more alive. Dr. Yura suddenly gasped, her amber eyes widening as if she was seeing the universe for the first time. "Daeon?" she whispered urgently, her voice barely audible through the communication system, but somehow carrying to every ship in the fleet. "I can see it now. The artifact... It's not just reacting to what's happening around us. It's orchestrating everything. This whole situation, the power inside me, even your immunity, it's all part of something much bigger." "What do you mean?" he asked, though something in his expression suggested he was beginning to understand. "This is the test," she said, her voice growing stronger as the revelation flooded through her consciousness like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "The architects didn't just give me this power randomly. They've been watching our species for thousands of years. waiting to see how different civilizations would respond when faced with someone who desperately needed help. Around the medical bay, the ice crystals on the walls began to glow with the same warm light as the artifact. Dr. Catherine's tentacles stopped their frantic movement over her instruments as she stared at her readings in amazement.
Yes.
Every species that touched me died because they approached with the wrong intentions, Uda continued, tears of understanding streaming down her scaled cheeks. The Zephyrian medic wanted to study me like a specimen. The Corvin technicians saw me as a problem to be solved with logic and machinery. Even the android tried to analyze me as data to be processed. But you just wanted to help, Dayon said simply. Exactly. And that's why the power couldn't hurt you. The artifact was designed to respond to pure intention. Compassion creates immunity. Selflessness generates protection. The architects weren't testing our technology or our strength, they were testing our hearts. The revelation hit the watching fleet like a shockwave. On Zephyrian ships, warriors who had conquered a dozen worlds found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew about power. In Corvon battle formations, logical minds struggled to process the illogical concept that emotion could overcome physics. Even the mysterious Shadari, monitoring from the edge of sensor range, began to stir with something that might have been understanding. But not everyone was ready to accept this new reality. The Shadari Concordat ships, which had remained silent throughout the entire exchange, suddenly erupted into coordinated action. Their vessels darker than the space around them, and seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it, launched a devastating attack without warning. Energy beams of impossible darkness lanced toward the medical station, each one carrying enough destructive force to vaporize a mountain. The Shadari had decided that if they couldn't understand or control the power, they would simply eliminate it entirely. The artifact behind Dayon and Yura suddenly erupted with blinding light that made every star in the surrounding space seem dim by comparison. The cryogenic field around Yura exploded outward, but instead of the deadly cold that had killed so many others, this energy was different. It formed a protective barrier around the entire station, a shield of crystallized space-time that deflected the Shadari attack beams like they were nothing more than flashlight beams hitting a mirror. Impossible, Admiral Klextar breathed from his flagship, watching his tactical displays show energy readings that shouldn't exist according to any known physics. No, Dayon said, his voice carrying a new authority as he felt the artifacts. Ancient power flowing through both him and Yura. Oh shit. This is what the architects wanted to show us. When we choose compassion over fear, when we risk everything for others, when we reach out instead of striking back, that's when we become something greater than the sum of our individual strengths. Shadari ships, finding their most powerful weapons completely useless against the protective field, began to retreat into the darkness between stars. Other ships in the fleet started to follow their lead, but Dayun's voice rang out across the communication channels. Wait, don't you want to know what comes next? Don't you want to see what the universe looks like when we stop being afraid of each other? The artifact pulsed one final time with a light so pure it seemed to cleanse the very fabric of space around it. Then, its crystalline surface began to crack like an egg hatching something wonderful. Light poured out through the fissures. But this wasn't the cold, deadly energy that had cursed Yura for 3 terrifying days. This light was warm, healing, alive with possibilities that no species had ever imagined. The test is complete, Yura said, tears of relief and joy streaming down her face as she felt the deadly field finally leaving her body like a fever breaking. And humanity passed. Not through strength or technology or superior firepower, but through the simple act of caring about someone else more than themselves, as the ancient device crumbled to harmless, glittering dust that sparkled like stardust. A new understanding began to dawn across the galaxy. The humans hadn't won through superior technology or overwhelming force. They had won by doing what they always seemed to reaching out to help someone in need. Regardless of the personal cost or risk involved, the real test had never been about surviving a deadly touch or containing a dangerous power. It had been about having the courage to care, the wisdom to choose love over fear, and the strength to try when everyone else had given up hope. 6 months after the incident at Medical Station Epsilon 7, the galaxy had transformed in ways that would have seemed impossible just a year earlier. The news networks that had once broadcast warnings about the frozen Death Woman now carried stories of unprecedented cooperation between species that had been enemies for centuries. Captain Kim Dae-yoon, his uniform now bearing the new insignia of the Galactic Compassion Corps, stood in the crystal-clear observation deck of the newly constructed Compassion Institute orbiting Haven Prime. The facility was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Built with Zephyrian metal-shaping technology, Corvin mathematical precision, and human intuition for creating spaces that felt welcoming rather than sterile. Beside him, Dr. Yura Velthani scrolled through daily reports on a holographic display. Her amber eyes bright with an energy that had nothing to do with ancient artifacts and everything to do with hope realized. Her blue scales now shimmered with their natural beauty again, no longer crackling with deadly frost patterns. 17 species have officially joined the program this month alone, she announced, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. The Zephyrian Empire wants to establish an empathy training division in their military academies. Can you believe? It warriors learning to feel instead of just fight. She swiped to the next report, shaking her head in amazement. Even the Corvins are requesting human advisors for their collective decision-making processes. They say our illogical, emotional responses actually improve their logical calculations by introducing variables they never considered. Dae-yoon chuckled, watching through the massive viewport as ships from dozens of different worlds docked peacefully at the orbital station's multiple piers. Sleek Altarian vessels with their bioluminescent hulls nestled beside angular Corvan transports. Massive Modaki cargo ships shared docking space with tiny scout vessels from species so new to space. Travel that their names weren't even in the galactic databases yet. Who would have thought, he mused, watching a group of mixed species, children playing together in the station's central park. All it took was someone willing to hold a hand when everyone else was afraid to try. The aftermath of the architect's test had sent ripple effects throughout galactic civilization that were still being felt. Ancient ruins on dozens of worlds had suddenly activated after millennia of silence, revealing more tests. More challenges designed to measure species not by their ability to conquer but by their willingness to sacrifice for others. Captain Kim, came a familiar rumbling voice. General Threshka approached across the observation deck, its massive insectoid frame somehow seeming less intimidating than it used to. The Modaki commander had requested a transfer to the Compassion Institute, claiming that his species had spent too many generations learning to fight and not enough learning to understand. General Daeon replied, offering a respectful nod. What brings you to the observation deck? The Galactic Council has reached a unanimous decision, Threshka announced. His mandibles clicking in what Dae-yoon had learned was the Modeka, equivalent of a smile. They want to establish the Human Diplomatic Corps as an official peacekeeping force with full authority to intervene in interspecies conflicts. Sir, apparently your species' ability to defuse impossible situations through stubborn empathy has become legendary across known space. The general's voice carried a note of fond amusement. There are betting pools on several worlds about which supposedly hopeless situation humans will resolve next. Yura laughed, a sound that would have been impossible during her days of deadly isolation but now rang out clear and joyful. They still don't understand, do they? What's that? Daeon asked, though he suspected he knew what she was getting at. It's not some special human superpower or genetic advantage. Any species in the galaxy could do what you did for me. You just have to care more about helping someone else than about protecting yourself from getting hurt. As if summoned by their conversation. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Dr. Kethrin's image materialized on the holographic display. Her tentacles moving in patterns that Dae-yoon had learned indicated extreme excitement among her aquatic species. Captain Dr. Velthani, you need to see this immediately, she said. Ah! Her voice bubbling with anticipation through the translation matrix. We've discovered another architect site in the Andromeda approach. Our long-range sensors are picking up energy signatures unlike anything we've seen before. The display shifted to show deep space scans of what appeared to be a massive crystalline structure floating in the void between galaxies. Easily the size of a small moon, but clearly artificial in origin, this one appears to be testing for something. Different from the compassion trials we've been documenting, Catherine continued. The energy pattern suggests it's designed for multiple species working together simultaneously. We think it might be the final examination. De-Yon and Yura exchanged glances that spoke volumes. In the months since their first meeting in that frozen containment cell, they had become more than colleagues or even friends. They were partners in the truest sense of the word, dedicated to bridging the gaps between species across the galaxy and proving that cooperation was stronger than competition. How soon can we have a ship ready? De-Yon asked. The new exploration vessel Unity's Dream is finishing its shakedown cruise tomorrow, Threshka reported. It's equipped with the latest cooperative technology human intuition systems, Corvin, computational matrices, Zephyrian adaptive hull plating, and Altarian bioneural networks, all working together. Perfect, Yura said, already mentally preparing for another journey into the unknown. This time, we won't be facing the unknown alone and afraid. What? As word spread throughout the Compassion Institute about the new architect discovery, volunteers from every species began signing up for the expedition. The response was overwhelming. Beings who had once viewed each other as threats or competitors now eagerly worked together toward a common goal: the exploration ship. Unity's Dream lifted off from Haven Prime's orbital facility 3 days later, carrying a crew that represented the greatest cooperative effort in galactic history as it engaged its hybrid jump drives and disappeared into the space between stars. The galaxy watched with a mixture of anticipation and pride. The age of conquest and fear was ending, replaced by something that humanity had always known instinctively, but that other species were just beginning to understand. The greatest strength in the universe wasn't the power to destroy enemies, but the courage to reach out and touch another soul, even when that soul looked nothing like your own. Behind them, on worlds throughout known space, members of dozens of species were learning to extend their hands in friendship rather than clench them into fists. The architect's test had changed everything, not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through the simple revolutionary act of choosing love over fear, hope over despair, and connection over isolation, and in the vast emptiness. Between the stars, ancient mechanisms that had waited for millions of years began to awaken once more, ready to test a new generation of beings who dared to believe that the universe was infinitely better when no one had to face its wonders and terrors alone. The human way was spreading across the galaxy. One world, one species, one outstretched hand at a time. The end.